Okay, let's get this show on the road tonight, right? There we go. We look like we are up and going. Good. We're looking good everywhere. So I think we're ready to go. All right. That looks good. Okay. Anyways, welcome to the stream tonight, you guys. Last or yesterday, I was gonna say last night, but it wasn't last night. Um, wound up working a bit late last night. I'm working on a document comparing some different state management propositions that we're making at work, um, and just trying to figure out how we best want to go about that. So I was doing some compare and contrast, and um, so my brain's a little bit fuzzy today. But yesterday during the day, we started our naive implementation of an option. And we did some discussions about, what are monoids, what are monads, what are endofunctors, what are identity functions, and all of that fun stuff. Um, so it's time to get back into it. Let's get this library tested and then show how it's going to help us, um, and why it's even worth the effort to use something like an option or a maybe. Um, before the stream, Michael was talking about browsers. Um, I feel a bit about Safari the way I used to feel about IE. Well, and probably still feel about IE. IE kind of did a lot of damage to the community in general. And a lot of that was intentional to try and force people to use their browser. Um, and like the amount of work or damage that Safari has done to PWAs um, has been frustrating to say the least, right? And that's just one small example of places where um, Safari has stood in the way of what other browsers are doing just to help Apple maintain its ecosystem. Um, and like the fact that on iOS, and I don't even know if this is still the case, but for a very long time, even if you were running like say Chrome on iOS or Opera or some other browser on iOS, it was still Safari underneath, just reskinned as whatever browser, right? Like that kind of stuff is just kind of silly and frustrating. So you definitely sniped me there. Um, and it, it, watching Safari run ads is kind of similar to the way I felt about IE running ads. Um, they're kind of seeing themselves circle the drain and making a last ditch effort, hoping that somebody throws them a lifeline. That's kind of the way I feel about it. At this point, I just kind of like to wash my hands of Safari and never have to worry about it again. Unfortunately, there are people out there who swear by Safari, and you cannot pry Safari out of their hands no matter what. They just like the way it integrates with their Mac or their iPhone or whatever. And so maybe I'm a little bit optimistic and hoping that it's circling the drain, but who knows? Anyway, enough of that. We are still testing our we're testing our maybe, right? Yep, that's the exact test. And this is one of the things that I really like about AI, right? Is I didn't have to type any of this test, and it works, right? It typed out a test. It matches the tests that I've been running before. It understands my code. It understands what I'm trying to do. And unit testing is something that I found very zen in the past, but it's becoming more so, becoming more so with the advent of AI helpers, right? Like not having to think about this stuff and just have AI pop something up, and I go, oh yeah, that would be what I would write. Boom, we're done, right? So we can see that's interesting. That should have run a test. Um, Very interesting. I wonder. Oh, there we go. Picked it up. Maximum call stack exceeded. Oh. I was curious about this. Um, this isn't gonna work. Um, because it's just gonna keep calling itself. I was really curious about because this calls this, and then we create another one that calls this, and it's just not a good experience. Um, which explains why my computer went crazy when we did this. So the question is, how do we handle the case where we want an error, um, but we don't want to pass it in? I don't think we want to make this optional. I'm just going to give it an empty string. Um, just going to say this has to be a string. And here, we can just make that an empty string. Um, yeah, for now, I think that's how we're going to handle this. Like the error is only here um, as just a way to show that we could do something. Like this shouldn't be here, and maybe I should just take it off. Maybe that's the better way to handle this. Because it doesn't really make sense to have an error um, on our none implementation. Um, yeah, that was just kind of a silly thing on my part. And let's get rid of it because it really doesn't make sense on a none. I mean, I'm polluting the ecosystem kind of. We can say, and we're still getting a failure here. To create a naive none without an error. Well, now we don't even need this without an error. It should just create a naive none. Um, right, we don't even have the notion of an error anymore. And error is still coming through with empty quotes. why would it do that? I wonder if I put things in a bad state. Oh, now we're passing. Maybe I hadn't saved everything. But I was curious if we'd put things in a bad state by breaking the call stack up here. Like that. uh, that's a horrible mess. And I should have known that I was creating an infinite loop. But you know, even senior devs do that. And sometimes I do it more often than I would like to admit. Um, you know, I'm gonna break out of this anyway, and I'm gonna restart it, just to make sure I've killed all the potential memory leaks that I may have caused and all of that fun stuff. Um, so that should, there we go. So we run and we pass, right? And so now there are a couple of things that we want to test, right? Um, so up here, we had all these different values. We don't need to test that, but we do have some tests that we need to do around bind. And so I'm just going to copy this over. That matches the it. There we go. We're just going to paste these in, and we're going to modify them. It's telling me, I think, that, yeah, this is a 30-line duplicated fragment. Here, it shouldn't return the result. It should return none. It should return naive none here. No matter how deep we chain, once we get a none, it should return none. And so here, instead of some, we're going to change this over. So we're going to rename this to be none. And here, we're just going to create a naive none. Boom. And the result should be none.bind. And then, right, we're trying to turn it to string, but really we expect this to be none, and we expect that to be any function. So we should get a none back when we bind this. And this one we'll fix up next, but we want to make sure that one passes. So yeah, so we do return a naive none. And so it should chain multiple binds, absolutely. Again, we're going to rename this to none. This is going to be a naive none. And here, again, this should just be none with a function on it. And maybe now you're starting to see the value of this, right? Because, and actually, we could even say that we expect the result to equal none. We could even go that far because that's what we're doing. We're just passing the same none back whenever we get it. So we can even go this far and say, hey, this should be equal. And there we go. We passed. Everything passed. And so, we're beginning to see the value of a naive none, right? Of none versus some and the optional, like the option stuff here. And there's one more test that I would like to do is it should handle a naive none mid chain, right? And so this is where kind of the error was a thought, right? It was to understand where that error was happening. but really an error could be an option, right, and not an undefined. And so we could actually take the code from up above. So here, we can take this code and use it here. And then we can take this code and put it here. And then we need the none. So we'll add that there. And then just right here, like maybe after the first one, we just do a dot bind and return none, right? And so what's happening is, the first thing returns a value, right? We double the value and that's fine. But for whatever reason, the next piece in the whatever we're doing fails and it gives us back a none. But notice nowhere in my code am I doing any if statements, right? I'm not saying that, hey, if I have a value, do this. And then here, I'm not saying if I have a value, do this. I'm just saying, you know, with this option, try and get this value, right? And we're doubling it, and that shouldn't fail. But then, hey, we had a failure. But then, hey, take this failure, turn it into a string, and then put it in an array. Well, that doesn't make sense to turn it to a string and put it into an array. So instead, we're just going to say, hey, we expect it to equal none. And there we go. So, right, our handle none mid-chain just succeeded. So all of our tests are passing. And this is the real power. And even if we go look at our naive option, right, there are no if statements anywhere in here. Never once have I checked, hey, am I a sum or a none? I've just said that, hey, when I'm a sum, bind it, and when I'm a none, don't bind it, right? And that's it. Or when I'm a sum, the bind should use this function, right? This bind function that calls the function and returns the value. And this function should return, should be a naive bind function that returns a naive option. And the naive bind function is up here, and we see that it returns an option, right? And that option can be a different type from the original, right? So we pass in a value, we can get a different type back. But nowhere in this entire thing do we ever use a comparison or an if statement. The only place we're going to have to use it is with the naive is sum. And there's one other match that we want to do. And maybe we'll write that one right now. Well, let's write the test for the naive is sum. So right here, we're going to describe naive is sum. Yep. And yep, that one works. We need to import that. Oh, and it actually wrote both tests for us, which I really appreciate. Right, they're both fairly simple, and so those tests both pass. There's one other. We can call it. What do we want to call it? Like there's one other endo functor, right, that allows us to move between data in here, and that one is the export function naive match Yeah. And here we will just, we're going to add a typing function here to just help people who are working through this. So naive match, naive match was definitely, that was actually pretty good. I like that one. Definitely dad joke worthy. Um, so naive match, what does naive match do, right? In a lot of programming languages, there's this concept of what do we want to call it? It's this concept of pattern matching, right? Like .NET recently introduced pattern matching, which allowed their switch statements to be really cool. And we can even do some interesting pattern matching in. I haven't even started up my browser. We can do some interesting pattern matching in JavaScript. Have you guys ever seen? Let's go to typescriptlang.org. Let's go to the playground. Have you guys ever seen this pattern? This pattern blew my mind the first time I saw it. So if we do switch true here, and we do case, and let's just do case. We need. See, it's been a while since I've done this pattern. I've got to look it up. JavaScript switch true. Basically, the way the pattern works is we're switching on the value true. We're passing true in. So this case has to match true. And so it's going to break out at the first case, but it allows us to do some pattern matching. Yeah, so here we've got this function that takes a date, right? Opening hours takes a date, and we get the day from the opening hours, and we're doing pattern matching here, right? So we're saying that 0 or 6 includes the day of the week. 0 is Sunday, 6 is Saturday. So then they're open 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. If the weekday is 1 on Monday, they're closed. Otherwise, they're open 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So they're doing some simple pattern matching here on weekday. And it's all because we're saying that switch has to match the true case. And so it has to evaluate this to see if it's true. If it's not true, it goes on to the next one and the next one, right? And we can do simple pattern matching in JavaScript like this. This is what I was thinking I was going to have to do. But it becomes really, really cool what we can do. And yeah, and the place where I learned about switch true was actually from TypeScript. And if you guys want to learn some crazy stuff, go to the TypeScript blog and like the handbook, and inside of here, you just look for what's new. I think it came, let's see, switch. Kind. So they improved how fast switch is, but I think in one of the, like, is it here? Switch. No, is it 4? Like sometime between 4 and where's the switch here? There isn't one. But reading through the documentation here is where I learned about how switch works and like the switch true. I know there's a switch here. So I try, I don't know. But I wasn't even aware of this pattern. And that's one of the cool things about switch true narrowing. Oh, 5.3. There we go. So in 5.3, yeah. So this pattern, I wasn't even aware of this pattern until I was reading through the documentation here. And so this function is pretty cool because, it takes in an unknown variable and does pattern matching on it, right? Type of string. Is it an array? Otherwise, we don't know what it is. And like, it's crazy because they talk about it in pull requests, so you can learn a whole bunch here. But the TypeScript blogs, right, are really, really good. And you learn a whole bunch of stuff about programming, how types work, and things like that. So thank you for finding that, Michael. I really appreciate it. And yeah, pattern matching is really, really powerful. And so we're going to do some pattern matching here. Well, not really, right? We're doing some type narrowing here. So the cool thing is that at this point, we know that option is we know that option is a naive option, and you can even see that or a naive sum, and it knows that already. And so it, here we can access the value, right? And that's because of the discriminated union. Here we can't. And so like right here, we could do, option dot, and all we've got is type and bind, right? We can't even access our value here, and it knows we can't, right? Value, and if we hover, it'll tell us, hey, value does not exist on naive none. And that's the power of the discriminated union that we're using here. We're discriminating on the field type. So here and here. And so this field is what is called our discriminant. And so when when this type value is this, we know it is this type. And when the type value is this, we know it is this type, which is a very powerful tool and one that's really cool. And I'm glad we've got it in TypeScript. I know it's so I've got some good friends who write a lot of .NET and C# code, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to get discriminated unions in the next version." Right? They really want these discriminated unions because they're so powerful. And the warning over here is that we haven't used it yet. Let's go ahead and write some tests, right? To show why we might want to use this, so describe naive match, right? So it should call on some? No. Yeah, it should. Yes, that's right. We got that. Right, and on some and on none, that's actually a pretty good test. So that matches that, that matches that, that matches that. We're missing some closing curly braces, and there we go. So this test is a pretty good test because if we give it a sum value, right, then we can say, hey, naive sum should have been called with 42. And that's the nice thing, is that we know that it should take in the value t and return some value. And you know, the next one is it should call on none with naive none, right? So it's going to do the same thing again. And we need another closing curly here, I believe. Am I outside of the describe? I am. That's why that one's working, but we can fix that easily. There we go. And so now our naive none is set up, and that all passes, right? So we've got 15 passing unit tests. The cool thing about this is we know what this should be. So like this one up here, we know that our function needs to have a number in it. So we could do, you know, naive match, and then, you know, we're going to match on some. And here we are going to, you know, say value. And here, you know, we could return value dot toString, right? And the on none is a function that takes in nothing, but we still have to return a string, right? So if I try to do undefined, it's how it takes it, right? Because what that does is it changes, you know, what we return. So we can return undefined here, but we can say none. And that's probably okay that we can return undefined here. You know, what's a little bit weirder is if we tried to return, you know, x 100, y 200, and this needs to be in parentheses because we're returning an object. And so now it doesn't like it, right? Because type string is not assignable to value or number. So there is, you know, there is a little bit of safety here. And that's another power, you know, of this. I didn't do. So we're returning values here, but we aren't returning the values from naive match, right? Naive match is a void. we could make naive match return U. And then here it would have to return that, and then return that. I'm trying to decide if there's value here, because the real point, and it's probably not any real value here. And the reason that there's probably not real value here is the point of match is that it, why are we returning value here? Let's just tell it right off the bat that, hey, it should only, and we can even, no, we'll say void. Void's fine. So we shouldn't return a value. And the reason for that is that a lot of the power of our unit testing and our tests comes in, okay, so we're still doing number in that. We don't need this either. There's no point in this returning a value. So the point of naive match is that we can pass it a closure, and that closure, when it runs, can run code and do something for us. So maybe it updates state for us, maybe it does something else for us, we don't know. And so that's the power of naive match. And we may change it in the future, but for now, it does what it's supposed to. And it'll do what we need it to when we want to. The point of naive match is to get values out of, so if we go look at our Excalidraw from yesterday, right? When we're working with with a monad like this, right? We start with a raw value, a raw type, right? The number 42. We then put it into monad land. And then when we do binding, we get it out, and then we put something back in. But at some point, we are going to want to. You know what? It's probably just easier for me to draw one. So at some point, we want to use our naive match. And the whole point of this is to get us back into user land basically here, right? So that, grab that. The whole point is to just get us back into user land, and to be able to run functions against it, right? And so we can think about this being like, at this point, we can think of it as like, observable dot next, 42, right? Or, this could be, string signal dot set 42, right? So things like this, right? We use our matching function to give us the value from our string, right? And in happy path, we're going to get a value, but in non-happy path, we're still going to get a none, and we're forced to handle that none. And that's the real power of this option. So let's use it, right? Let's go ahead and use it and just see what it does for us. The first place where I want to use it was here. Is that I originally had error message set to be a string, but we don't need that anymore. Now it can be a naive option string, right? And so now we need to import our naive option, which tells me that we need to go take a look at our index class because I don't think yeah, fix that up. So let's export star from so /lib. So there we go. So now we've got our naive options available. So now we should be able to import it here. We can't yet, but import naive option from, I think it's at modular state, state naive option. Oh, and it's a capital N on it. That's why it's not finding it. Right? Yep. So there we go. So now we've got a string, and here we can just, hey, this starts out as a naive none. Boom. And so now our state has the ability to return a none or a sum. And there's another cool thing that we can do. I believe if we mark this with an underscore, that it becomes a private state and can only be used internally. And the power of that is that in our feature, because this is now a private state, right? We've got our methods. Signal store feature has this, and then we can also say, hey, it also uses with state, and we need to import that. Come on, import it. Why are you not importing? And we can say, hey, our state should come from our empty Venn decode state, right? Empty Venn decode state. Boom. Add a comma here. And that should bring that in. And then our with state should come in. And now if we look at our with Venn decoder, it has the underscore on it. Let's go take a look really quick at ngrx.io / we'll go here and then we'll go into the docs. And in our state, in our signals, in the signal store, they added private state. And maybe the best place to go look for this is in the version 18. So before there's a separation, after the action interface, in typed action interfaces. Okay, that's ngrx store. Component store, router store, ESLint. Um, okay, maybe this isn't the best place to look for it. Let's see. Signal Store version 18 release notes. So here we go. Let me put this in the chat for you guys. These are the release notes on the Signal Store for version 18, and we got some really cool stuff with version 18. So with version 18, we get a couple of really cool things. Well, first of all, they're stable, but state encapsulation. One of the cool things is that, before this used to work, you used to do a patch state from anywhere and it would work. Now with version 18, this will fail, but the patch state here will succeed. Yeah, they're protecting the signal store. I made this mistake a couple of times when it was painful in the beginning. But private store members, right? So signal store allows defining private members that cannot be accessed from outside the store by using the underscore prefix. This includes root level state slices, computed signals, and methods. So here, right, by adding that underscore, I can make this this, what do we want to call it? In our model here, I can make error message, I can make it private, right? So that it's not visible outside the store. But what I can do is I can say, hey, we want to add with computed, and let's bring that in. It's so weird. It's like refusing to bring it in until, or did it bring it in? Oh, it did. It just didn't update the draw. Okay. So here, now we can say, hey, we're going to bring in our store, and we're going to return some computed methods. And the first one we want to return is, we know that our error message is optional. And so what we can do is we can just say, hey, we're going to go computed. We're going to go error message. And we're going to say store, or actually we want to do it's computed here, and we want to say that it's going to be, we don't even need to do this. We can just, actually we do need to do it this way. So we can say that, hey, our error equals, and this is where we go store dot error message, and not like you wanted to do it, like this, and this will create the dependency that the computed needs to know, so that when this updates, it knows to update. And then the next thing we can do is we can say, hey, oh, this might be where the match doesn't work. It looks like we do need to return something from match, and so that's good to know. So our naive match does need to return a value. So t comma u, and here we'll grab a u. Here we will grab a u also, and this should return a u. And that's probably going to break our return that and return that. There we go. That will probably break our unit tests. No, it didn't. Trying to decide how we want to handle this. Because I want to use a computed here. I think what I did here is the wrong way to handle this. And instead, what we can do is we can add another endo functor here, right? A function, and this function will be naive value t comma u or t, right? And this will take in our option of naive option t. And it will also take in, yeah, we could call it a default value of type t. So there we go. So now we've got a function that can grab the values from our from one of our options, and either give us the value or a default value, right? And there, one place where you might see this, where I've experienced it the most, is in like .NET, right? In .NET, when you're using link, and link has a lot of functional influences, but one of the values, or one of the things that link has, and maybe we'll name ours that also, is default if none, right? In .NET, they call it default if null, but we're going to call ours default if none. And so we need to make sure that we test our function, right? So we're going to describe default if none. That just write my whole test for me. So default if none. There we go. So if there's none, then we give it a value, right? So in this case, we're saying, hey, we've got a sum value, right? So in this case, we expect our value to be 42. But in this case, we expect our value to be 0. And we can even see here that the result is 0 because our default value is 0. So that all works. That works great. So we're good there. And so now we can go back to our feature. And inside of here, we can just say, hey, return default if none, error or an empty error, right? And there we go. So by using optional, we were able to create an error, but we haven't used undefined ever. We could use undefined at this point, right? Here we could say, hey, undefined. And that's fine, right? Because, and there's a reason we might want to do that. And the reason we might want to do that is we'll probably be using default at none at the edge of our code, right? The boundaries of our code. And if we reach the boundary of our code, we might be interacting with an API that expects an undefined or a null value or something like that, right? We might be interacting with another library, right, that can't handle our option, and so we might want to pass that a nullish value of some sort, right? So once we reach the boundaries of our code where we no longer are in control, but we're interacting with something else, we may want to introduce undefineds and nulls, but nowhere else in our code do we want to do that. And so that's the next thing that I want to do. It is complaining. What's the complaining about here? That's fine. State. Yeah, we'll use that eventually. So ESLint and TypeScript are complaining, or no, this is ESLint telling us about it. This is WebStorm telling us about it, and this is TypeScript telling us about it. So we've got 3 errors for the same variable coming from 3 different places. I love it. I actually really like that because we should be mindful of this stuff. And having 3 different errors hit us on that is kind of hilarious to me. Let's see in our code, where are we using undefined? None. That's awesome. What about null? So here we go. We've got we're taking a null in here. We're taking nulls in here. And like this PNPM lock stuff is not us. So, but let's take a look here, right? We're taking in a partial vehicle or null, right? What if we made this method instead take in an option of partial vehicle? And it needs to be a naive option, right? Boom. So how does this change our code? Well, first of all, this check right here isn't needed. Instead, we can say if not is sum, right? Naive is sum, updates, then we return, right? So if we don't have updates, then we return. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to patch our state. But here we know that our updates have a value on them. So we can just grab the value right here. And there we go. So now we've completely removed our null value from our code. we've broken our code, right? So we need to find any usages of this code. So we want to find usages. No usages found. We've got some broken code out there. We'll go fix it. The compiler will catch it for us. It probably already is because I'm not. We'll catch it here in a second, but let's keep removing our nulls, right? So in this very same file, we've got another null here. And this now needs to be a naive option of partial vehicle. And that's why our code wasn't breaking on compile. So that one fixes that, and we go look for more null. So here we've got another one. So we just throw in our naive option of partial vehicle details this time. And we need to import our naive option. And again, here we just need to say well, we don't even need to do this, which is crazy, right? And we should probably, that's the crazy thing is, we can just go here and instead of doing this, which we'll comment out, but what we could do instead is we could just say, hey, naive match updates, right? And here we get our updates because this is if it matches. And let's go ahead and pull this in, right? Oh, come on. What are we doing? There we go. So we get our updates and then we can do something with our updates. Otherwise, we just give it a no op here. And what do we do with our updates? Well, because we're using a closure, we can just move this in here. And we don't even need, we don't even need the updates.value anymore. We could probably rename this to be, we can say this is our update values, right? And here we can call this our update values, just so that we avoid the variable shadowing and stuff like that. And now we've completely removed the need to even check it, right? We're just saying whatever, but we could even go one step further, right? The naive match gives us the ability to do that, but we don't even have to do that. We could just say, hey, naive updates bind, and here we'll just say, hey, update values, and boom. And now inside of here, we could patch our state, right? And we can just return null, or we could return here. Doesn't like this. What doesn't it like? Because we should be able to do this, right? It's not assignable to native bind. Oh, and here we could just return naive none, right? We don't care at this point. We need to return, something. But this works just as well. Because if updates is a naive none, we're never going to try and patch the state. If updates is something else, then we will. And really, we could even from here, we could return updates, right? We could return updates. And this would allow us to do something else, right? Like we could bind here and we would have updates again, right? We could potentially have updates. And so by following this pattern, we can patch our state, and we don't even need our naive match, right? And this is the power of the tuples that were, or not, why did I say tuples? Where did I even come up with that? This is the power of the option monad that we're using, right? Because we're using it, we can now see that, we can just call bind, and on our bind, hey, let's just patch our state, and then return updates if we actually have an update. This function will never be run if we don't have an update. We don't care, right? And we could continue to bind on our updates and do other stuff. And that's some real power. Gives us real abilities here. For example, we could potentially bind and maybe pull some stuff off of update values, right? And then we would return an object that has the stuff that we pulled off, or we could do a check for certain properties. But we know this code will only be run if there is update values. And so we can do the same here. We don't need this code anymore. Instead, we can just do that. That works. That works. And so now we've taken out a whole bunch of if statements, right? We've taken out a whole bunch of other things. We've just said, we've gone from imperative, right? And we can look at the imperative versus the declarative here. So if we go take a look at what we've changed. On this side, we've gone, this is the imperative form, right? Where it says, hey, if updates are null, then you just return, right? Otherwise, patch the store with our updates, right? Here, we're just saying, hey, patch the store with our updates, right? And that's the declarative versus the imperative, right? In the declarative, we say, hey, we've got these updates, just patch the store with them, and move on. Here, we have to do all these checks, right? And the problem with this is that null and undefined tend to, they're a lot like any. Once you use them, they start to infect the whole project, right? And they affect it in ways that you can't control. And once you add null, it's pretty much null all the way down because you're always having to make null checks, right? And that's why TypeScript has things like strict type checking. Well, if we never use null or undefined, who cares about or strict null checks, not strict type checks, right? But if we never use null or undefined, who cares about null or undefined? We never check for them. And that's the power that we've got here. We can just tell it, do this. And if it can do it, it will do it. If it can't, then it won't. And we could chain a whole bunch of these binds together and say, do this, and then do this, and then do this, and do this. And it will do the ones that it can, and the ones that it can't, then, it will handle differently. Error handling becomes a bit of something that we might want to take a look at. How do we want to handle errors? And that's one of the pieces that, that's why I wanted to do this, right? Because there's a lot of power here, but there's also a bunch of unknowns in my own head. I've never actually done this pattern. And it's not something that you're like, hey, let's introduce this at work when you've never done it before, right? or hey, let's introduce this to to some open source project that we've never done it before with. But the nice thing about streaming is that hey, I've got all these projects that I'm pretty much the sole owner of, and you know what? If I decide to screw up a project, so be it. But there is very real power. I mean, going from imperative form to declarative form, we don't even care anymore about nulls or undefineds. We just say, hey, do this, and well, we don't even tell it to do this. We just say, hey, we would like to do this, and then it's up to the option to decide, can we do this? Let's keep removing our nulls, and it looks like there's really only one null left. Is that true? That is crazy. Oh, and it's just because I didn't update this. Really, we can just make this our naive option. Boom. And boom. And there we go. And all of this is possible because of closures, right? So this is a closure, and what do we mean by a closure? This function exists for as long as updates exists, and it captures the state of anything outside of it. So right here, we're capturing updates, right? Because we're returning updates. So this closure exists because it's captured updates, so it has to exist as long as updates exist. And that's the idea of a closure, right? It's kind of like military or sci-fi stuff, right? Set up a perimeter, and let's keep everything inside of our perimeter, right? That's kind of what we can think about a closure is, right? As soon as we try to use updates inside of this anonymous function, the V8 engine goes, oh no, we need to set up a perimeter and contain everything that's needed by this closure. And closures can be dangerous. They can be a source of memory leaks, but they also give us a lot of power. So, this closure is what allows our monad to work, right? So, there's danger and power here, right? With great power comes great responsibility. To quote the famous Spider-Man, right? And actually, it's not Spider-Man. It's it depends on which Spider-Verse you're in, who says it to him, right? Whether it's Aunt May, who knows, right? Whoever it is that says it to Spider-Man, right? But yeah, great. With great power comes great responsibility. Be careful with your closures. Make sure that every so often you go into your dev tools and you look at your memory management. And maybe maybe it's time to go back and do that again. We did that last year, where we actually went in and we dug into memory management and looked for memory leaks, and we found some memory leaks. We fixed some memory leaks, right? Maybe it's time to do that again as we're talking closures. But anyway, we've removed everything in our code that's not generated code or imported code that refers to null. So we're going to go compile, and this won't serve. And the reason it won't serve is that the stuff that's calling our functions isn't using optionals. See, we've got compiler errors here, but these will be easy to fix. So arguments of type observable any or null is not assignable to parameter of type native option or naive option partial vehicle details, right? Or observable naive option partial details or signal, right? So we need to go fix this line. And this line is on our details component 103. Let's go fix up our vehicle details component, because how do we get into this world, right? So let's go find our vehicle details component and go to line 103. And we can already see it's red for us. We're just throwing this observable into our update. We're going to need to fix that. But we can easily do that. We can pipe, right? And on our pipe, we can say that, hey, these are our changes. And we need to do something with our changes, right? So if changes is nullish, then we return a naive none, right? Which we import. Boom. Otherwise, we do a naive sum of our changes. Boom. And it doesn't like this. Why? Object is possibly null. Which object is possibly null? Well, now it's time to start adding in our question marks, right? Is it our value changes? Is that? Type undefined. Observable any or null. Returns a multicasting observable. So the value changes is potentially null. So let's fix that, right? So we can say this dot form value changes equals null. Then we do a naive none. Otherwise, we do an, that should work. And it doesn't like it now. Why doesn't it like it now? Object is possibly null. Oh, what am I doing? I need a map operator here. That. There's that. There's that. I make this mistake a lot. And really, we don't even need this anymore, because we can just say, hey, value changes is potentially null, right? But we could also say, hey, naive none, if it is. And there we go. So now we've fixed up our code. So basically what we've said, so we're moving from undefined, right? We don't control the form API, and value changes can be an observable of anything, or it can be null, right? And So changes here is anything. Um, so we just say, hey, if changes is nullish, right? That's what double equals null is. Then turn it into a naive none. Otherwise, pass in the changes. Um, and then we're using optional chaining here, which is going to potentially turn this into an undefined. So then we just need to use the nullish, or yeah, the nullish coalescing operator to say, hey, if we get an undefined, just give us a naive none. And so this takes us from our API land, right, where we potentially get null, into our safe land, where we potentially, where we can potentially get, well, where we will never have a null or undefined. And there is one issue. This import can be shortened. Oh, yeah, it wants to shorten it to modular state, but it can't do that shortening because that's a circular reference and we don't want that. So that fixes up that piece. And we probably introduced some more issues, right? So we're regenerating here. So the last one that we've got it in is in the vehicle info component. Let's go ahead and fix that one up. Vehicle info component. And at the very bottom, we can see the red down here. So same issue here. We're going to go question mark dot pipe, boom, and this is going to return naive none. Otherwise, we're going to pipe. And this is where I think we might want to create an operator that will do this for us. Which we could absolutely do. But here we just want to map. So we're going to bring in our map operator. These are our changes. And we're going to say, hey, if changes is nullish, naive none, otherwise naive some, and changes, right? So unless you control the entire library chain, you can't get totally away from checks, right? Like we're having to make these checks because of because we don't control the value changes, right? One thing we could do instead of having to copy this code over and over is potentially look at an operator, which I think I will do once I understand what that looks like better. But now that we've made this change, everything compiles, everything works. So like our styles, our main JS chunks are small. We've got a bunch of other chunks. So let's go make sure that our application works, right? And there's other really cool things in this this change, like state management and stuff like that. Not state management, but change tracking, right? So right away we can look and let's potentially change this to be like a 2000 Ford Focus SE, and it will be red. That was the first car I ever bought myself, and it had a 4-cylinder in it. It was gas. We can see that our Ford Focus is there. We can see down here. Here's our Ford Focus, and it's red with a V4. V4. That's hilarious. 4-cylinder. Yeah, it's a 4-cylinder engine. I never called it a V4, and so that sounded really weird to me. But we can see here that we've still got everything's there. The Ford Focus. We could say, oh, we need to change the stock number. It should be J for Jason, and it should be number 42 because that's my lucky number for whatever reason. And here, 4-cylinder gas. It did have tinted windows. It did have a sunroof. It didn't have heated seats, and it did not have nav, right? And so we can see down here that all of that stuff updated. We can see down here that it all updated. And if we go back to the other view of our data, we can see here that our heated seats and nav are off, but our sunroof and tinted windows are on. And actually, I did not have a sunroof, I'm realizing. And so we can see here that there is no sunroof, no sunroof here. If we go back to our wizard, boom, we can see no sunroof. And so we've completely removed null and undefined from all of our code. We're still having to deal with null and undefined because, right, Angular as a library still uses null and undefined. And some other libraries that we use may use null or undefined, but in our code, we no longer use it. And there's a lot of power there. Let's go ahead and commit this. Yeah, hey, Jan, welcome to the stream, man. I've fallen down a functional hole for a bit here. I've been having a lot of time, a lot of fun explaining that. Yeah, I definitely need to. I need to get onto the X state stuff. If you guys don't know, Jan, he works for JetBrains, and if you guys ever have questions about JetBrains stuff, and you have an opportunity to speak with Jan, he's he's a great representative of JetBrains. He will help you out, as people on the stream will attest to. So JetBrains, I've used their stuff. So first of all, I want to be upfront with you guys. I do get JetBrains stuff for free. However, I have been purchasing JetBrains stuff on my own since the early 2000s, right? I've been using ReSharper for .NET development. I've been using various, JetBrains IDEs for Java development that I've done. So while I do love the company and I think Jan's amazing, and I do want to be upfront that I do get JetBrains stuff for free right now, I would still say that regardless of what I'm receiving. I do truly think that Jan's amazing, and I love the JetBrains stuff. And Jan, you've earned it, man. He's just amazing. But anyway, yeah, we're getting back into our Vin decoder, and yeah, and Michael, yeah, says he talked with Jan last week, because Michael is having some problems with his WebStorm, I think, and was able to work through that through office hours with Jan. So anyway, let's get this all committed. So we've taken all of our nulls out, and we're now using our naive option. I did say that we would bring in another functional library, and in the future we might, right? Because there's some other things, and this is where this stream is kind of turned a little bit crazy. there's some other functional things that I think we can look at that will make your day-to-day life easier, right? You don't have to go full functional, and you don't have to go full object oriented in ECMAScript, right? Whether you're using TypeScript, JavaScript, whatever, right? You don't have to go full either way. I think you should be aware of the tools that are available to you and make good use of those tools, right? So things like pure functions, I think, are highly valuable. Things like an option monad are highly valuable. Things like partial application and currying, I want to look at both of those too. And show how we can use currying to create partial application. And what is the value of partial application? So yeah, nice. So yeah, I got distracted, right? Because I sniped myself. But Jan is working on an XState implementation for Angular. And so if you go out there and you look at XState stuff, I have a library and it wraps XState in component store. And I based that library a lot on some work by, I think it was Ken Dodds. I want to say it was him. I'm fairly certain that's who it was based on. But right, in the past, to work with XState, we typically, in Angular, we typically wrapped it in something so that we could work with it. Jan is working on kind of a native implementation that we can drop in. And because we have signals now and things like that, we can even make the native XState implementation look a lot like, I don't know, I hate to say it, but we can make it look a lot like React, right? And I know that that's kind of, oh no, did he just say React in an Angular stream? Yeah, I did.
I'm sorry. I'm here right now.
So as some of you guys know, our puppy had surgery. And she is a high energy pup. And now that like her scars are starting to heal, it's only been a week, not even a week. Tomorrow it'll have been a week since she's had her surgery. But she's feeling good. And so she's really resentful that we're still making her sit and we're not making her jump. We're not allowing her to jump or run around a lot. She's very high energy, and the way she shows her love is by just running into you as fast as possible. What?
She got her belly.
Oh no.
I need to keep it on my. I gotta leave.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. So she has to wear the cone of shame. I don't know if you saw it. Come here, sweetie. Let's say hi to everybody. Come here. I know you know what's going on, but so here she is. She's got her cone of shame on, right? She absolutely hates this thing because she's a very loving dog, and she loves to be able to lick people and touch them with her nose. Yeah, poor puppy. But she's very, very loving, and she's very high energy. She's a golden doodle. She's a micro mini, and if you guys know anything about golden doodles, they're smart. They also have a funny sense of humor, and they're very set in what they want to do. So like right now, she's fighting against me. I'm holding on to her. She knows that my wife and daughter are leaving to take my daughter to dance, and she knows that they're going, and she wants to go in the car with them. But my wife came into my office because she saw the dog outside without her cone of shame on, and she's figured out how to take it off. My wife was showing me that she's not supposed to be licking her scar. And so we can tell that she was licking her scar by the way it looks. And I'm going to let her down. But Um, yeah, that she hates that cone of shame, and how she figured out how to get it off, I don't know. But golden doodles are incredibly resourceful and very, very, very smart. Um, so if you want a fun dog, a golden doodle's an amazing dog. All sizes. They're very, very friendly. They integrate really well with your family. They just want to be part of the pack, but they're also like they often have a sense of humor that's at your expense, right? And so um, one of my puppy's favorite things to do, and she is good at knowing when to do it, uh, is if I'm not careful about how I sit down on a couch or something, she will see me and she will run as fast as she can and hit me in the groin with all of her strength. And she finds that hilarious, and she does it anytime she gets a chance. But to be very, very careful with her because that's her sense of humor, right? And so, but you see videos online of golden doodles like pulling chairs out from underneath people when they go to sit down and stuff. That's their sense of humor, and um, I love it. But they're mischievous dogs. They're fun dogs, and I've never had a dog that is more loving than her name's Indy. I've never had a dog that's more loving than Indy. Like she just loves the entire family. And if you leave to go to the store for like an hour, as soon as you walk in the door, she is there to give you all the loves in the world and let you know that she missed you. And just amazing dogs. So um, if you're thinking about dogs, I highly recommend a golden doodle. But just be aware they are mischievous dogs and they're very high energy. And the reason she had to get surgery was because she ate like 25 feet of quarter-inch cord. We don't know where she got it. We don't own it. We think she pulled it under the fence from a neighbor's yard, or maybe it got thrown over our fence from a neighbor's yard. We don't know where she got it. So 25 feet winds up being like 6.5 meters, I think, maybe 7 to 8 meters, maybe. But you guys saw how big she was, and the mass of cord they removed from her stomach was like that big. Um, and so that's why she had to have surgery. She's recovering from that. She's doing really well. She's not doing as well as she thinks she is, but definitely got a little bit distracted. We love our puppy. She's amazing. Anyway, let's get this all committed. Again, here we replaced no, here we had to get into our monads, right? So we have to make our checks here. But this gives us safety. So there's that here. Again, we removed the imperative, right? And we're into a declarative. And the same here. And then I think I'm going to think about how to create an operator to do this instead of having to create this code every time we want to, every time we want to give an option to the code. The other thing I think I started saying, I don't think I'm going to pull in a functional library yet. When I do, we'll swap over to their version of maybe or option. But for now, our library works pretty well for our needs. And I'm actually, we had some help from Copilot, but I'm actually pretty proud of the option that we wrote. It works well, and it worked really, really well. Ooh, I just saw Jan say that Alpha 1 has been published a couple weeks ago. So Chow has Angular 3. Jan has X-State. I have an idea, and I've been talking about this idea for a while. of kind of a Slay the Spire rogue like game, right? A card battler. That I said WWE. I'm honestly debating if we. I've had another idea about we could create like a card battler, and I have to be very careful about this one because it could potentially offend people, and I don't want to do that. But the idea is, you're some sort of minor god, um, and your job, or you've decided that maybe you're a demigod or some sort of minor god, and you've decided that you want to raise your standing. Um, and so you can go up against, the various other gods, right? So like the Viking gods, or the Greek gods, or the Roman gods, or the Hindu gods, or the Mayan, right? There's so many pantheons of gods out there, um, and one of the things that I think would be fun is to have AI potentially even generate like minor gods within that pantheon, right? So, you could start out as this minor god who's decided that they want to become the god of war in the Aztec pantheon. And then the AI can generate minor gods that you have to battle on your way to fighting the god of war in the Aztec pantheon or something like that. So yeah, and Chow heard his name. Chow he's got great instincts, but welcome to the stream, Chow. Good to have you here. So X State will fit that amazingly well because state machines and games go together incredibly well. And then we can use Angular 3 to draw our cards and stuff like that. So sounds like Hades. There is a bit of I will say there is a bit of inspiration from Hades there. I will also say that there's a bit of inspiration, like probably one of the most amazing games that I haven't played, and it really bothers me, is the modern God of War games. Like I played all of the God of War games on the PS2 and PS3 because I owned those machines. I didn't have a PS4 or a PS5, but the modern God of War games and their take on like pantheons of gods and especially just how gods as they are gods for so long, what their psychology happens to be and things like that, and Kratos and how as he's been the god of war for so long. There's a whole bunch of incredible stuff that's been explored there, and so a lot of inspiration from a lot of different things. Yeah, Chow heard Angular 3. So, but yeah, that's on the horizon. I've owned all the God of War games up to PS4 one. I used to play the one on PSP a bunch, and exactly like the God of War games are so good. The premise is amazing, right? I don't think I'm spoiling anything by right. The whole reason that Kratos became the God of War is because he got so angry that the Wrath blades attached to him, and he was able to use them to kill Ares at the end of the first God of War, right? And things just got crazier from there. But really, the whole thing they're doing with like the Viking pantheon and Kratos with the Greek pantheon, um, a lot of fun, just amazing. And I will admit that like Thor fits in there a bit too. Like one of my absolute favorite scenes in Thor is is it what's the one with the goats? I don't even remember what it's called, but they take the goats and they show up in Elysium. Was it Elysium? I don't remember, but it's where all the gods are hiding out from the god killer, right? and just Thor's interaction with the gods there, and how the gods are all such bumbling fools, and Thor is so finished with them. One of my absolute like stuff like that fascinates me. Slay the Spire board game. I've never played it. You'll have to let me know how it is. Like Slay the Spire is an amazing game. Um, one of my all-time favorites. And um, another fun one that's card based is Balatro. I don't know why that one is just so fun for me, but I really like Balatro. Um, I didn't like Octopath Traveler, but Octopath Traveler 2 has some fun mechanics that I'm really enjoying, but I don't know if I'm going to have the time to put into it to do very well. Um, so I was playing Balatro for the first. Yeah, it's there's like there's a lot of randomness to it, and randomness really speaks to me. So like one of my all-time favorite games, well, game series of all time is the modern XCOM. What they did with XCOM and XCOM 1 and 2, like XCOM 2, I enjoyed Enemy Unknown quite a bit, but XCOM 2 took it to that next level with just randomness and cards. And uh, for, for me, I enjoy reacting to randomness. Um, Darkest Dungeon, I also really enjoy those. Yeah, the Balatro Magic. You should get so I'm totally sniped at this point. And it's probably good because I've got about 10 minutes. And I probably need to go watch my puppy. Where did she go? There she is. Um, so I have this footrest thing um, that I'm supposed to use because I have calcified Achilles tendons. And when I'm sitting, the doctors want my feet up a little bit. Um, I don't get to use it very often because my puppy has taken it over. I mean, that's where she is right now. Um, oh man, Elden Ring. Like I have huge respect for Elden Ring. Um, like people who can play Elden Ring amaze me. I am not that good at Souls-like games, and I just get destroyed, and it frustrates me. But I love watching people who are good at those games because those games are epic and amazing looking. I just can't play them. Um, so we created naive option and replaced all nullish values. Um, so like I'm so bad at them, and people can laugh at me all they want. You beat Elden Ring twice. Very approachable. You can cheese it, but still feel great. Maybe I'll have to look at Elden Ring. There's another series that I really like. Um, Man, I'm really considering getting a PS5 just to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Oh, dude. Um, Final Fantasy VII is like that's peak nostalgia for me. And it's kind of tough because my memories of Final Fantasy VII, and then when I've gone back to try and play Final Fantasy VII, are different things. But like when you're a kid and you've got all the time in the world, it doesn't matter to you that Knights of the Round takes, I can't even remember. I think it's like a 10-minute cast. Is that right? Am I right on that? Um, but Knights of the Round was how I cheesed some of the end bosses because the poison ticks keep going. while Knights of the Round is going. And so the poison would keep ticking on the bosses, and then I would cast this super long summon, like one of the longest summons I've ever experienced. And then the poison just keeps ticking. And so, once that summon, which is really powerful in and of itself, finishes, the boss has been hit by so much poison and hasn't had a chance to attack, that we jump to the next phase or stuff like that, right? So I cheesed a lot of the end of Final Fantasy VII using Knights of the Round. But I remember my brothers and I would spend hours with graph paper trying to come up with materia combinations that we would put into weapons and stuff like that. So, oh man, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that brings me back. Um, Final Fantasy Tactics would make me buy a PS instantly. Um, you play Disgaea, Jan? Um, Disgaea is one of my absolute favorites. It's like one of my absolute favorite series, and I own quite a few of them. But Disgaea is similar to Final Fantasy Tactics, but it takes itself a little bit less seriously. Um, and it's available on the PlayStation. It's available on Steam. It's available on the Switch. In fact, when I flew to Australia, I had Disgaea 6 on my Switch because the end games in the Disgaea games are crazy. There, there's this weird mechanic in Disgaea where, like, the level of your character indicates power to a certain extent, but it's highly likely that a level 1 character with the right equipment is more powerful than a level 99 character, which is the highest level character in the game. Um, and because of reincarnation and the fact that you keep some of your stats when you reincarnate, and then your level ups are percentage based, um, you can wind up with characters that have in the billions of hit points, right? So this guy, like its end game where you're leveling, reincarnating, and then it's got this notion of like an item world. So every item has a world inside of it, and some levels, like some items have 30 floors, some items have 50 floors, and some items have 100 floors in them. I mean, it's all based on rarity, right? So legendary items have 100 floors. And it even gets crazier than that. There's ways to get 200 floors. And then um, there are ways to access like this even more difficult way to play the game called the Land of Carnage. And so like the end game just changes as you're diving through items to make your items stronger. You're reincarnating. You're recruiting what they call innocence, and you can combine innocence to make you put them on your weapons to allow you to level up faster. And just there's so much craziness to the game. One of my favorite tactics games. But I am a huge. I love JRPGs, right? I started on the original Final Fantasy on the NES, um, and then it was called Final Fantasy 2. Now it's Final Fantasy 4. I have played Final Fantasy 2 and 3, but Final Fantasy 4 is another peak nostalgia, but that one holds up pretty well from what I remember as a kid. Final Fantasy 3, which is Final Fantasy 6, is also another one that I liked. Final Fantasy 5 introduced the job system, if I remember right. And I didn't enjoy that one as much. And then, we had 7, 8. I really enjoyed 8. I played through 8 quite a few times. Um, there was something about the story. 9 I never beat. 9 has some of the most iconic characters, but I've never beaten 9. Like Eevee is like when I think of a black mage, like a black wizard or a black mage, that's Eevee, right, from Final Fantasy 9. And then the princess in her white robes, classic white wizard. So Final Fantasy 9 is very iconic. I've never beaten it. 10. What was 10? Was 10 the first MMO? No, that was the one. Oh man, that was the one with Sin, right? Yeah, it was Titus and the whole Blitzball stuff. 10 is an amazing game. I love 10. Final Fantasy 11 was the first MMO. Final Fantasy 12 was that one was Lightning, right? Or was that Vaughn? Man, it's been a while since I played some of those. I think 12 is Vaughn, right? It's the one that behaves like an MMO with the oh man, Vaughn is 12. Thank you. And then Lightning is 13, right? Yeah. So, and then 14 is the next MMO. Yeah, exactly. I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan. Love the games. Um, and like Dragon Warrior also. So I'm really excited about the remake that I just saw on Steam of Dragon Warrior 3. Um, Dragon Warrior 3 is a high nostalgia game for me from my childhood also. Um, I I remember spending hours finding medals to go gamble in the casino as a kid. Um, I don't know if I'm going to enjoy the game as much because again, right, like grinding time. Um, and that's the worst thing about becoming an adult is you don't have all that time to grind, and maybe it's a good thing. Who knows? But yeah, um, oh, I love talking games. Baldur's Gate 3 is a game I'm trying to finish right now. I'm into Act 3. I don't want to talk too much about it because if you haven't played the game, um, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the few games where I was surprised by the direction the story took. Um, I intentionally stayed away from spoilers. Um, and I've intentionally not Googled choices or decisions because there are some choices that I've really struggled with. I'm like, oh, what should I do? I love that about the game. But I've been playing that game for probably 9 months, and I haven't finished it. So like these MMOs kind of scare me. Um, but yeah, if you guys haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, um, that one's amazing. Just like the sheer amount of stuff you can do. Um, yeah. Thursday. What will we do Thursday? When I come back Thursday, we're gonna finish our Vindicoder. I wanted to kick into that today, but I definitely need to end here. I may as well. We're right on time. Sweet. I need to end. I'm gonna go sit with my puppy and just try to help her understand that she's not being punished um, by having to wear her cone, and so make her feel good about life. And then oh, I've also got to finish a document for work tomorrow. Um, I mentioned at the beginning, um, I'm comparing a couple of, so we have a couple of different ideas on how to decouple state. Um, and I've been comparing those ideas and I've been writing a document about it. We're going to be talking about that in the morning. So I've got to finish up that document tonight. And yeah, but Thursday we'll build our Vindicoder. I think it'll be interesting to take a look at. One thing I do want to potentially investigate is right now our VIN is just a string, but a VIN isn't really just a string. A VIN has to have a certain number of characters. And there are other rules to VINs. And so I'm thinking about potentially turning our VIN into a value object, and potentially discussing what a value object means. We could potentially talk about stock numbers as value objects, and why we might want to do that. Phone numbers, social security numbers, those are other good places to look at value objects. And then more functional stuff. I really enjoy the functional aspect of programming. But thank you guys. Thank you for coming and hanging out. Thank you guys for sharing games. I have a love for games. I have a love for Star Wars. I have a love for Star Trek, Stargate. So I'm noticing a theme in the sci-fi that I consume. I also really, really, really enjoy dark sci-fi. Like if you write a sci-fi that does not end happily for the characters, or fantasy. The Magicians on the Sci-Fi Channel. Oh man, that scratched an itch for me. Um, that that series does not end happily ever after, and I loved it for it. Like District 9, I went and saw that with my wife, and we walked out of there, and my wife was so angry, um, and she was so frustrated. I was like, "Oh, that was a great movie, wasn't it?" She's like, "No, that movie sucks. We didn't get resolution for anybody. Nobody had a happy ending." Right? I loved that. So, you know, uh, but definitely thank you guys for coming and sharing some of the stuff that I enjoyed. We'll see you guys Thursday, 5:30 p.m. Mountain. We'll get into Vin decoding. Probably be some more discussion of some programming stuff that you guys can start using, that will like small things, right? That will make things better in the code that you're writing. So thank you for joining us. I really had a great time, and we'll see you guys next time.